Hi, everyone. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host Ken Miller. And on this episode of Random Fit, we are talking about our episode 3 of our fairy tale fitness tips, if you will. And this one, we're going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk and growing your vertical jump.
Now, when it comes to growing your vertical jump, we talk about things like the value of an assessment, the progression from stability to power, and what does it take to keep that power all the way from the nervous system down to the muscles. So follow, subscribe, download, give us a 5 out of 5 rating when you can, and enjoy this episode.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host Ken Miller. And today we are talking about episode 3 of our 5-part fairy tale series, if you will. So if you haven't gone back and listened to 1 or 2, so episodes number 1 or number 2, you really should do so because we provided some great content. So just to give you a quick summary, in episode 1, we did the Goldilocks principle. So we were really talking about getting the stress of the body just right. Then on episode 2, we talked about the 3 little pigs and building a fitness foundation. That kind of says it all, but we go into a lot of really cool detail about that. But on today's episode, we are going to be talking about Jack and the Beanstalk. So I don't know if you guys remember that, but growing your vertical leap. So we're going to talk a lot about the stretch shortening cycle. We're going to talk a little bit about neural adaptations, how the body deals with those demands, all kinds of cool stuff. So Ken, first of all, how are you?
I am good. I was wondering when you were going to bring me in, but
well, it's all about me, right?
Well, for the 5 episodes of this fitness fairy tale series, I think you did a great job of explaining the first 2, and now we're getting into power. So I'm excited about this one because, most importantly, Wendy, I'm looking to kind of ask you some questions and see how you grow your clients' vertical leap. Now, considering your clientele, I know you have tennis players, you have basketball players, you've worked with baseball. All those sports require power and quickness and speed and agility, but the power that the vertical jump requires, right? And all that goes into developing a good, strong vertical jump, especially with your NBA players. I am looking to kind of pick your brain a little bit on this idea. I mean, you've got a wealth of experience. A lot of people don't realize how versed and experienced you are in helping people increase their performance. So that's what I'm looking forward to when we talk about Jack and the Beanstalk. You want to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk and why we anchored to this fairy tale for this? I mean, it's kind of sounds already like it, but
I mean, you got to think it's the magic that allows the seed to create the beanstalk, right? So in order for you to grow, you must have the seed planted, you have to water it, care for it, provide sunlight, and then it's going to grow. Well, the body's the exact same way. And I think too, when we really focus, and a majority of this is on the stretch shortening cycle. So again, when we're talking about that, that's a physiological mechanisms that really makes the explosive training so foundational and makes it so effective. In order to be able to jump high, you've got to be able to load correctly and then be able to jump as explosively as possible. And there's something called the elastic energy storage component that is pretty much the foundation of that. And those of you guys that have been part of NASM, or if you're new to NASM, we do have this training model called the optimal performance training model. And we start with different phases, right? We build a strong foundation. And I think oftentimes when we think we got to grow our vertical, it's doing a ton of jumps as fast and as high as possible. And that's actually what's going to lead to success, when it is not. So Ken, when we start to go into detail about the stretch shortening cycle and the way that our body adapts to what that even means, what like if you were to say something about explosive or plyo and somebody walks right into your doors and they say, listen, I want to grow my vertical jump, what do you say to them first?
I'm going to have to say, first of all, before we build your engine, right? A lot of people think it's about the explosiveness. It's about getting that 38 plus inch vertical, right? And they think about how much power and how big your engine is, meaning the glutes, to get you to get that high off the ground. But a lot of people don't think about that when it comes to accelerating. The first question you have to ask is, how well can you decelerate? How well can you slow down? Because what goes up must come down, right? So you jump that high in the air, all that mass and momentum has to come back down to the ground first, right? So one, can you control the body? Can you decelerate? Can you put on the brakes before we build up that engine? So when we talk about that elastic storage, or you mentioned that stretch shortening cycle, that is the loading before you unload. So before you jump, you're going to load the Achilles, you're going to stretch, you're going to get a little bit of stretch through the calf, and that's where foot and ankle mobility come in first. And then as you're squatting down, however far you need to squat to get that jump, you're loading the hips, you're loading the quad. As that arm swings back, you're loading your torso. A lot of people forget that your lower body is only going to be as efficient as your upper body. So for one, we need to look at how you can recruit, or how well you recruit, the loading of the essential muscles. So in that case, when we talk about triple flexion, right? You're squatting, your ankles are bent, your ankles are flexing, knees are flexing, hips are flexing, right? Before you get into that triple extension, now you're extending through the ankles, the knees, and the hips, and that's what propels you vertically. So when we talk about that stretch shortening cycle, it's the triple flexion before the triple extension. So the first thing I have to educate my athletes on is, how well can you flex before you extend? And it's when you can efficiently do that, then you can capitalize off of that stretch shortening cycle, and then get that explosiveness when it comes to that vertical.
Well, and I mean, you hit so many valid points. And I mean, I always say, well, that's great. The first thing we're going to do is an assessment personally, because to everything that you just said, if somebody comes in and I have them do an overhead squat assessment and their feet are turning outward, which is very common compensation, right? People's ankles are not moving as efficiently as they should, usually because of tightness in the calves. And so we're going to look at how well the foot and ankle is moving, just like you said, for definitely coming up and leaving the ground. But then also if their knees are caving in, okay, that says a lot about the functioning of the outer hip and those muscles. Are they actually firing correctly? And then do they have any dysfunction at the hip complex? Meaning, do they have a low back arch, or are they posteriorly tilting, meaning that their back is rounded? Because how they show me that they're squatting kind of in slow motion is going to show me exactly how they're going to squat to start if I speed them up or land explosively as possible. And if someone's feet are out and knees are coming in, you can see that they're at an absolute high risk of possible ACL injuries or knee issues long term, or having something that's not moving as ideally. Plus, if my feet go out, my knees cave in, and I'm having some kind of shift or let's say tilt, if you will, in my pelvis, no matter what direction, that takes time away, right? So like you said, how you're loading, if I have all this dysfunction hitting the ground, I've got to make sure my body is going out, my knees are in, my hips are this way. That slows my acceleration from that decelerated position. So the lower part of the squat, it's going to slow me down on the top part. Well, if you think about that, yes, injury risks are even higher. So that's a predictor for me right there. We need to stop. But when you talk about the elastic energy storage, think about this. If I have a rubber band and I pull it back really slow and pause and let it go, it's not going to go as far as if I have a rubber band, I pull it back fast and then let it go, right? There's going to be a big difference between the distance covered and the speed at which it's covered. And so our body's kind of the same way. So like to your point, if we learn how to decelerate correctly and we have ideal movement patterns on the way down, when I'm coming out of that squat or I'm loading it, it's just like the rubber band. If I go down really well and I've got good mechanics and I can then accelerate, I'm going to be able to increase my vertical jump just by having good alignment within the body, not even working on at that point doing anything other than having proper link tension relationships in the muscles that will get me off of the ground. So that's why I say, assessments are important, because it is about safety first. If I can get all muscles firing on, at faster speeds, I'm going to have power, which is going to obviously increase my vertical just by correcting compensation patterns alone.
Right. And I love the rubber band analogy, Wendy, because when you talk about how far you pull that rubber band and then how far, once you let go of that rubber band, it's going to go based on how far you pull it back. What we are talking about there is flexibility and range of motion, right? Flexibility just meaning how far you can take those joints through its optimal range of motion, something that's appropriate for that person. Everybody's going to be a little bit different just based on anatomy and training history. But when you talk about the assessment process, and I know this isn't a podcast episode on corrective exercise. However, it's hard to get power and that explosiveness that we're talking about with the vertical jump if you're stiff, right? If you are restricted through your ankle, if you're restricted through your hips. So it's hard to pull back that rubber band if it's a stiff and immobile, let's say dry rubber band that's not very flexible. Because what's going to happen when you try to pull a rubber band that's dry and old too far, right? It's going to break, right? And this is where we can talk about, you mentioned some injuries from that vantage point. So if you don't have the flexibility, optimal range of motion for you to, in this case of the vertical jump, right? If your ankles are restricted because you have tight calves, tighter plantar fascia, right? And it's immobile, you want that knee to go over the foot, but it can't because you've got a lot of tension through that backside of that lower posterior chain. Well, I mean, we saw it in, the end of the 2025 basketball season, right? With some unfortunate Achilles issues, right? And not saying that was the only factor that contributed to those injuries, but I'm sure that it wasn't something that was in their favor when it came to moving optimally. So first thing we need to look at when it comes to moving optimally, and once you've had a chance to do a movement assessment, overhead squat assessment is what we like to use, and addressing those limitations is going to be one of the first things that you do after the assessment to address the limitations into getting that person to move more efficiently so that they can use and access the muscles responsible for getting that vertical jump going.
And one of the reasons I love this series, I mean, I know we're talking it as a fairy tale series, but I mean, if you think about progressive overload and you think about us talking about the model and the reason why we really do start with stabilization and building a good foundation is because we do focus first on proper movement patterns. I mean, we just said it on the corrective side, we're making sure we have good alignment to increase the range of motion. But a big part of what we do within that phase is we slow things down. We teach our body, like you said, how to decelerate, how to slow down. So when we do something like a push-up, instead of just banging out push-ups as fast as we can, we're not worried about form and it's about the quantity versus the quality. I would say, okay, instead of doing however many you can in a short period of time, just set yourself to do 12 to 15 repetitions to start, going down really slow, like for a 4 count, pausing at the bottom and pushing all the way up, and then repeating by slowing yourself down. The reason that's important is we also do focus on plyometrics in that one particular phase. And the plyometrics that we do, we have that individual learn landing mechanics. We're teaching the body how to absorb the force correctly. And I don't think we talk about it enough, but there's something called the reactive portion of your foot. And that's what I train my athletes to understand from the very start is when they jump, I shouldn't hear their landing because I'm absorbing that force correctly if I have a softer landing, but that's also letting me know where they're hitting on the bottom of their foot and how their body is absorbing that type of eccentric contraction, meaning the load, before we go into explode, right? So the reactive portion is behind, if you ask somebody, well, where is that? Most people will say, oh, it's the ball of your foot. It's actually, if you bend your tennis shoe where that bend is at the top between, you know, if you're holding the top, like where the toe is and the heel, and you bend your shoe, there's an automatic break in the shoe, right? Because you're bending it into a U-shaped position. That's the reactive part of the portion of the tennis shoe. But on your foot, it's actually behind the ball of your foot and in front of the arch. It's a very small area of where you should land. So I say that because if we learn how to land on the reactive portion, our body absorbs that force. So then we think about loading it, we pause, we correct any dysfunction, and then we have them stand. And we teach that pattern over and over and over again. Then when we start to speed it up, we've got good positioning. We're landing on the right portion of our foot. And so in order to be able to load correctly with good movement patterns and foundations, we're able to trigger this reflex. And it's called your, like the reflective muscle activation component. So we're looking specifically at this myotactic reflex, meaning that once we're down into what we just talked about, the elastic energy storage, we went down, we have good alignment. In order to concentrically accelerate, right, to power up, we want to trigger that reflex, because then that triggers this contraction that is then going to be really powerful. And then if we're coming up off of our toes and we're in, like you said, triple extension, and we're really moving on up, that's going to transfer significantly into the total of force that's produced. And again, we need ideal alignment for that to happen. But if we train very slowly from the start and then we work ourselves up, it doesn't take that much time to start increasing that vertical jump just because you've got good alignment. But ultimately, that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for the energy storage on the way down, and then being able to then trigger it for the reflexive muscle activation on the way up. And if we can do that with the reactive portion of the foot, even if we want to do continuous jumps, we're decreasing the time spent on the ground, which is the amortization phase, which is super important too, especially if we're trying to, go into the combines where they're looking for different bounding positions, length covered as well as vertical.
Right. And I just want our listeners to know, our viewers to know, that what you just discussed there, Wendy, as important as it takes time to develop that reflex. So if if you want to improve or increase your level of competition, your performance on the court, or if you're just decided, you joined a basketball league and you're going from couch to court, right? Couch to court. This stuff takes time, right? Because if you have like a reflexes take time. Reflexes take time to hone and to actually wake up those muscles and the soft tissues, the tendons and the ligaments, the receptors that are in the joints, in the muscles, right? Because we have receptors all over the place. Now, to get everything fired up in synchronicity, in coordination, it takes time. So what you're talking about there, Wendy, I think everybody has to understand. It's just not that, okay, well, talking about flexibility, range of motion. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do these fast feet, these plyometric drills. Yeah, you're going to get better, but you have to give yourself time. You can't do what a lot of my kid clients, my high schoolers will do, is they'll show me some kind of social media post and say, hey, can we do this? I go, yeah, let's do it in like 6 weeks. We're not going to do it today because we, as a group, we're not there. Right. Well, if we're going to do this as a team, let's go ahead and progress ourselves. So let's do one set of 15, just to throw out a number there. Let's go then 2 sets of 15, then 3 sets of 15. And then let's go ahead and increase the amplitude. So let's go ahead and hop a little higher, a little faster. And then that's where, I know that I've got confidence in their soft tissues to be able to respond to that myotactic reflex that you talked about, Wendy. So just know that it does take time to do that, because as much as we want to stimulate a reflex, we have to make sure that the surrounding soft tissues are there to support it all. And I think that's where we can get in trouble if we don't consider, the safety aspect of progressions. Right. We have to look at volume. We have to look at intensity. And, those are just the 2 things primarily to look at when it comes to progressing to getting your vertical jump higher.
Well, and we've talked about this in other episodes. I think even in episode 1 and 2 of this actual series, that it takes the body about 4 to 6 weeks to adapt. And so depending on how many compensations patterns that you may have, or how maybe you may be lacking range of motion, to your point, it does take time. So when I said, if we work on it, yes, it is going to take some time. And again, you've got to think, where's your athlete coming from? Like you said, if they're from the couch, it may take them a little bit of time longer, maybe more on the 6 weeks, but you're reassessing hopefully every 4 to see where they're at. You should be seeing gains each and every time you reassess, meaning they have better movement quality and patterning when you're reassessing them from when they started. Now, if you have a professional athlete, sometimes their body adapts quicker because it's used to moving quicker. It's used to having different demands on it. So they may be on the lower end of that 4 weeks. You may start to see progressions in less than that. And again, you're going to know as you're going through a training program where they're falling. You're going to see where they start. But oftentimes, professional athletes have a ton of compensations because of the wear and tear and repetitive motions that you see. So often we're like, oh, that they're a professional athlete, we should be doing more jumping and more of this, that, and the other. When think about their sport, if they're doing practices or they're working with a different coach, I mean, a lot of my athletes, they have their different types of coaches on different portions of the court. Some that are just working specifically on, nailing threes at different levels, some that are working on boxing out, some that are doing more defensive and offensive type plays. And then they work with me, and then they have their massage therapist. And then they have, there's a lot of different things going on. So that's why it's important to realize, okay, what are you doing besides working with your trainer? So therefore you can incorporate that repetitive movement and then build programs that are going to offset what they're doing on a repetitive motion. Because if they're jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping, you need to work on the muscles to get better alignment that are on the opposite side of some of these that they're using on the daily, especially explosively like that. Now, Ken, before we go in, I think it's really important that we talk about the central nervous system and how that plays a role. But before we get into that, I just want to say that this episode of Random Fit is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So, Ken, we talked about obviously how it works, right? The eccentric going down, loading, being able to explode up. But if a brain that programs the system of the muscles isn't working, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what happens there?
Well, the brain rules it all, right? The brain controls everything. So again, talking about the optimum performance training model and starting off with the assessment process and starting off nice and slow. And we talked about being able to land and decelerate and control all that mass and momentum when you're hitting the ground after you've jumped, however high you're going to jump. But when you talk about programming and getting the brain wired up to be explosive, we just need to know, again, to put all the phases together, or the adaptations. We need to work on body control and stability. So the brain needs to be able to control the stabilizers of the hip, the knee, and the ankle, right? Just to pick on the lower body alone. So first of all, can you control that? And that's actually speaking to the point of efficient jumping mechanics, right? Making sure the knees don't collapse in and the feet don't turn out when you're jumping, when you're trying to be efficient. So stabilization training allows you to become more stable when you're jumping and landing. And then you're going to get into strength. So now this is about recruiting, right? All the muscles involved with jumping. So can we use our glutes? Can we use our quads? Can we get our upper body to be just as involved as the lower body when it comes to jumping? So how much recruitment can we have? And then when it comes to the explosiveness, this is where we're looking at being fast and explosive. And this is a part of how we would train for power. So in the case of vertical jump, we might go with a heavy squat, something that's challenging us for up to 5 repetitions. And then we are teaching the nervous system to be explosive as we do some repeat squat jumps, just to pick 2 basic exercises. So once we get all the muscles fired up and recruited, right, through the glutes and the quads, just to name a couple muscle groups here, then we have to teach it to be fast and explosive. And that's where power comes from. So I just listed off here 3 adaptations: stability, strength, and leading up to power. But it's the brain that's responsible for the recruitment of the right muscles at the right time. That's what we call just movement efficiency. And then the max recruitment of all the muscles, and that's what we're actually working through when it comes to strength. And then the fast and explosiveness, that's when we start to get into power. So the brain, so a lot of people think, okay, well, it's just muscular stability, muscular strength, and then fast recruitment of muscles. But what do you think controls all of that? Right? So the coordination of the stabilizers, the recruitment of the muscles, and then the quick access to be able to contract those muscles to be explosive. The brain is in charge of all of that.
Yep. And I think, when we think of the brain being in control of it, I mean, and you just said it very well. I mean, again, we need to have that foundation. We need to have the proper movement patterns and all of that. But, strength is also really important. So the reason why we kind of make this a progression, if you will, is because obviously we need a good foundation, meaning the right muscles are firing at the right time. But then we need something like absolute strength. And you can't really train for plyometrics, meaning true plyometrics, without having a strong base of strength as well. And so, with the athletes that I deal with, we have to demonstrate a minimal level of absolute strength. Okay. And we do that before we engage in super high intensity plyometrics, which again follows that OPT model. And we're only as strong as we are stable. That's why that foundation is perfect. We do that first, right? And we're only as powerful as we are strong. And so in order to really have high eccentric forces, to get the plyometric lift that we're looking for, we've got to be able to have that strength. So when we are going down and loading that eccentric component in order to concentrically lift, we need the power. Like you said, we need our quads and our glutes and our calves and everything to get us up. And so I think sometimes when we think, oh, okay, we're just going to do all these HIIT classes and that's going to help me jump higher and move faster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yes, but you have to have a base of support with strength. And I think that's where, sometimes I think our programming is lacking certain things, because you really do, like you said, if you do 1 to 5 repetitions, that is maximal strength. If I can get maximal strength with proper alignment and then I go load them in a plyo with no weight, they're going to be able to fly up a lot higher, because I know that they have proper movement patterns, range of motion, now strength. Now I can actually start increasing the amount that they're, or not necessarily the speed in which that's happening. And that way I am going to maximize that jump. And so I tell people that are working with athletes, especially if they're training for the combine, those vertical jump numbers matter. They really matter. Their bench press matters. I mean, so being able to lift heavy and move fast, those are very important for this. And that is millions of dollars of contracts that if you're lacking one is going to lead to money lost. And so, and they're hiring you to make sure that you're getting them on the highest level and helping them move as specifically as possible. So yes, the brain's going to be in charge of all of that, but building the foundation with strength and then power is going to truly make you that trainer that's helping them excel, which then again, they won't leave you. Trust me, they'll stay with you for a really long time, because they see the value and the way that you're strategically progressing their program to make sure that they're maximally executing whatever lift, jump, or whatever they're doing, running.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously if they've got good mechanics to jump, they're going to have really good mechanics to run.
Right, exactly. And I think, to kind of move forward on this topic, we've discussed the assessment process, the programming from stability through strength and into power. But now that, let's just say that beanstalk is as tall as it's going to be, right? You're jumping high. You've increased your vertical by 2, 3, 4 inches. Sometimes, Wendy, I'm now curious about your work history and some of the guys that you've worked with. What is the biggest vertical jump increase you've seen? Like somebody who's been assessed.
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I mean,
Yeah.
it varies. I mean, there are some people that come in, and that's just it. It's like you think, okay, are they a guard? Or, positioning also
Yeah.
matters
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
because they come in with a base. What I'm able to help create. I mean, you would be surprised because, again, just even going through some of the basic foundational movements and getting better range of motion, they're already increasing. And I haven't even really worked on just their actual mechanics for that
Mm-hmm.
vertical jump. And because again, if we're really focusing on proper squat mechanics, which is what we're
Right.
doing even in phase 1, then they're going to be able to load and explode because that's what they know. But you've got a 7-1 center. He's going to be way different than someone
Yeah.
that's a guard, right? That is used to moving fast, jumping, and doing those things. So positioning matters, I think, too. But I mean, I have seen some incredible increases, which I'm like, wow, okay. Either
Yeah.
I always say this is all because of me. That's another reason they come back. Like, you would never have this unless we had done this programming. But,
Right.
but it is awesome to see them be able, especially when we do the vertical jump that has the, like, where I forgot what you call the actual
The Vertec.
Vertec. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, why am I spacing on that?
Yeah.
But it's actually really awesome when you see them going almost to the very top, when in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, they only moved maybe 4 or 5 sticks from where we started. So
yeah,
depends.
and a lot of people don't realize like that level of athlete to get even one more inch higher is huge, right? Because you think of a guy who's been playing basketball for 12 plus years already, right? They've done traditional strength conditioning, and then for them to be a professional and increase just even 1, maybe 2 inches, that's a big leap. Now, when you're dealing with high school kids, right, this is where you're going to see like 4 and 5. I mean, because they're still learning their body. So just to give you guys, our listeners here, for Random Fit, if the younger you are, just by learning body control is huge. Just by learning how to control your hips, like what you talked about, Wendy, is just learning how to use and react to that reactive part of the foot, and just technique alone can get somebody another half a foot higher on their vertical jump. So just by cleaning things up, I think, is one big message when it comes to increasing vertical jump. Doesn't mean you have to squat 50 more pounds and get 50 more jumps each practice. Sometimes just moving more efficiently and brushing up on your jumping technique, because there are some tricks to trying to get, especially if you're using a Vertec, you have to jump and reach up. There's some ways to cheat too. I don't know if you've
I've seen it.
Alligator, they're touching that bottom line. They're right here, but then when they reach, they're way up there. So there's some ways to cheat it out. But
Yeah. And their starting position, a lot of them too will be like they'll want to get into the like running and then jumping. I'm like, no, this is from like a static, like load and explode. And that's what I say most of those times when I'm working with them. That's the ultimate goal, is to get that to happen. And everybody has their own, way of saying it, but that's what I say to them. We load it, explode it. We load it, explode it. And we start that terminology from the start, and then it becomes a quicker, repetitive way of me saying that. But I want to just finish with this one statement, because I think it's really important, is, we talk about the importance of high intensity training and working in power and really being able to load and explode, right? So being able to eccentrically load and being able to concentrically contract as fast as possible. That obviously, when we have power and strength, or good stabilization and strength behind it, we're going to get more power. We will get more lift off of the ground. But just remember that high intensity plyometrics, the demand that is placing on the body, that if you're not recovering and really thinking like you want to recover the muscles, but the nervous system also needs to recover. That's when you're talking about the brain, but it fully needs to regenerate it. If you don't do that and you don't give yourself, a good amount, sufficient amount of rest, if you will, then that can lead to diminishing powers of return. And it's also going to lead to the body finally breaking down. And then we're going to start to see compensation patterns reappear if you're not careful. So if you are really going to go into a true power type workout, then you want to integrate it with the different phases, if you will, of training, going back even in 1 week, like thinking about 1 week, for example, you could do like a phase 2, which would be like a superset, doing something strong. So working on strength and immediately doing something to mimic that movement pattern in a stabilized position. So slower repetitions, higher repetitions, but slower movements and with slower tempo. And then maybe on Wednesday, you're doing that power workout. You're blowing it up as high, as fast, as powerful as you possibly can. So therefore, you're really working on that reflex and trying to get all the muscles recruiting. We've got everything synchronized. We're getting good lifts, good movement, good speed. And then on Friday, you go into more of a phase 1 to undo what you just did on Monday and Wednesday. If you can do that, and then you give yourself, like we've talked about, doing recovery days, active recovery days, then you're going to have better outcomes when they come back. So really focusing on giving yourself time to rest and not blowing up these athletes or even your clients, that's going to be extremely important, because you really want all cylinders firing, but your body needs to recover after something that's that intense.
Yep. I think I know that's a big missing piece to conditioning programs, especially those that are trying to develop strength and power. As you know, Wendy, when it comes that time for the combine, whether it's NFL or NBA, these guys they're just pedal to the metal and they're going hard. And then once the combines are done, they're just exhausted at that point. But I think that with a lot of them, if they implemented some kind of recovery strategy, I mean, just beyond the ice baths, right? The traditional ice baths, what they'll do at the end of their practices. I mean, that's one modality. Using it the right way is another episode altogether. But incorporating corrective exercise, stabilization training, allowing the body an opportunity to reap the benefits of an intense workout, that's the missing link for a lot of people, and also a key to preventing the excess stress that can contribute to injury. So Miss Wendy Batts, thank you so much for your insights and sharing your experience when it comes to your side of Jack and the Beanstalk and growing your vertical jump, right? Jack and the Beanstalk, I'd say that wasn't my favorite fairy tale, but
It wasn't really mine either, but it works in this situation of context of what we're talking about. So yeah. But
we'll
Ken, thanks for this for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So for those of you listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, here on Random Fit on this episode of, was it third episode of our fitness fairy tale? Third. Yeah, we're getting up there on our Jack and the Beanstalk, growing your vertical jump. So like, follow, subscribe, download. If you haven't listened to the other 2 episodes, go back and listen to those. And then we're going to have another 2 to complete the 5 episodes of our fitness fairy tale episodes. So like, follow, subscribe, download, share. Let us know what you want to talk about on future episodes. Of course, after we finish that 5th episode, we'll get something on here for you. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.